Good afternoon, everyone. Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal. I welcome you all in our income tax session. Today, we will be discussing the last session for TDS, Advanced Tax and TCS, and majority we will discuss the provision for tax collection at source. And we will also cover section 194Q of TDS and section 234B and 234C, that is interest on non-payment or short payment of advanced tax provision. And also, as well as all these topics, we will cover the MCQs and of course the test your knowledge questions. So once again, Lahari, good afternoon. Apur, good afternoon. Dinesh, Nitin, Manvi, Neeru, Prakriti, Pallavi, Ragini, Bhumika, Sania, Hardik, a very, very good afternoon to all of you. And I believe you must be studying for your goal to becoming a chartered accountant as soon as possible. So before wasting more time, let's discuss the thought for the day. And you can see whatever we need to be a chartered accountant, everything has been including in this thought for the day. Success is no accident because you need a certain things, a certain combination, you need certain ingredients to the recipe, which is technically success. So success cannot be by luck or by any accident. It is technically comprise the hard work, the perseverance, that means the persistence, learning, studying, sacrifice, and most of all, love of what you are doing or learning to do. So, to create interest in your study, to create interest to becoming a chartered accountant, that is very, very important. Because if you fall in love with the profession, with the study, with this profession, or with to achieve the goal of your life, so everything else would be not going to matter for you because you will definitely going to do hard work yourself. There should be a continuity, a perseverance, of course, persistency, learning, studying, and sacrifice. So these are the ingredients to achieve any kind of success in your life. Okay. So that was the thought for the day. Moving on to the notes. Okay, Hardik want to ask something. Yes, Hardik, go ahead. Nancy, good afternoon. Sir, if I have deposit bank account 145 crore in saving account, and sir, the bank provide us an interest of 4%, which amount to 5.8 crore, and in the end of the year 2025, I withdraw 25 crore from the bank, then sir, will 194A and 194N both would be applicable on me, and bank will deduct TDS for interest 10% and withdrawal 2%. Yes, both would be applicable if you are going to withdraw in cash form. Clear? One more thing, bank is not going to deduct TDS on interest at the end of the financial year. Generally, they deduct the TDS on quarterly basis because they generally credit the saving account interest on quarterly basis. So whenever they will credit that amount, they will deduct the TDS at the time of credit of interest. And of course, the amount of withdrawal, if that exceed the specified limit of section 194N, that is cash withdrawal. And if that limit has been exceeded, the amount of TDS is going to be deducted on exceeding the amount of that withdrawal. Clear? So technically, saving account interest TDS deduction would be quarterly, and the 194 and TDS would be deductible at the time of withdrawing after a specified limit. अंशिका कुछ पूछ रही हैं सर, चैप्टर डिडक्शन क्वेश्चन नंबर 3 टेस्ट योर नॉलेज समझ नहीं आया. अंशिका, आई डिड नॉट टेक दैट लेक्चर ऑफ डिडक्शंस, सो अनफॉर्चुनेटली आई वुड नॉट बी एबल टू clear your query. So I'm so sorry for that. I will try if I have left some time. Then in the next lecture, I will try to take this query if it was possible. Okay. So let's discuss the provision one by one. We are on tax collection at source, and in the last session, we have discussed the difference between the tax deduction and tax collection. So tax deduction was the amount which is going to be deducted out of the payment a payer is going to be made. Suppose 100 rupees going to be paid by a payer, and if TDS is 10%, then technically he will deduct 10 rupees and you will get 90 rupees only. But if the scenario is not TDS, but if the scenario falls under TCS, then if 100 rupees is there, and TCS is applicable, then anything, the rate of TCS is going to be extra charge from the buyer. So we have certain things which are going to be included under TCS provision. What are these things? We can see with the help of a diagram in short. So tax collection at sources are technically on 4 transactions. One is section 206C1, which covers certain goods and certain licensee services. So if you trading in these goods or you are providing these kind of technical tendering services or license, then TCS required to be collected at 1% in some cases, 5% in some cases, and 2.5% in some cases. I'm just trying to give you a introduction that under TCS, we have to learn 4 sections. In section number 1, that is section 206C1, there are specified goods and some specified tenders, or you can say some license regarding services has been included. Those are going to be charged at the rate of either 1%, 2.5 or 5%. We have different kinds of rates for these tenders and goods that we will discuss later in detail. Then the second section is section 206C1F. That is applicable if you purchase a motor vehicle and the value of consideration is exceeding 10 lakh rupees. Then the dealer will ask you to pay 1% more on the value of that motor vehicle. Suppose the value is 12 lakh rupees, and if that is so, the value is exceeding 10 lakh rupees, then 1% of 12 lakh you have to pay as TCS to the dealer, the seller. So buyer will pay extra 1%. The 1% is going to be deposited by the seller to the income tax department, and of course buyer can take the credit same like TDS at the time of filing of the return. So section 206C includes certain kinds of goods and tender and services. In these goods, motor vehicle has not been included. Clear? So motor vehicle if exceeding 10 lakh rupees, each motor vehicle if exceeding 10 lakh rupees, TCS would be charged at the rate of 1%. Now we have third section, that is section 206C1G. Let me clarify one thing. Do not ask anything right now regarding section 206C1 or 1F or 1G or H. We are going to discuss each of these sections separately in detail, one by one. I am just providing you a summary, or you can see an introduction part of TCS, that what kind of transaction, what kind of provision we have to go through under TCS provision. So you can send me queries when we will discuss section in details. Okay. So section 2061G, that is for tour package. So if you are taking a tour package, or if you are remittance, foreign remittance would be considered under section 206C1G. If there is a tour package up to 7 lakh rupees of payment, the TCS rate would be 5%. And more than 7 lakh rupees, the TCS rate would be 20%. Suppose somebody has paid 10 lakh rupees, then up to starting 7 lakh rupees, the rate would be 5%, and for balance, the rate would be 20%. We have examples, we have clarification, we have each and everything regarding these sections. Okay, just be patient. We will discuss each and everything in detail. If there is a foreign remittance, then up to 7 lakh rupees, the TCS rate is nil. And if it's exceeding 7 lakh rupees, then if it is for medical or education purpose, the rate of TCS would be 5%. If that is medical or education section 80E, that is loan purpose, then the rate would be 0.5%. If that is for any other reason, the foreign remittance is for any other reason, the rate would be 20%. And section 206C1H, it is correlated with section 194Q of TDS, what we have left in the TDS provision. So these two are technically interconnected. Section 194 if applicable, 194Q if applicable, because transactions are almost same under section 194Q and 206C1H. So if 194Q is applicable, then section 206C1H will not be applicable. So it is having the overriding effect, or you can say it will prevail over section 206C1H. If section 194Q is not applicable and the transaction fall under these section, because the transaction natures are same under section 194Q and 206C1H. So if 194Q is not applicable due to some reason, then section 206C1H would be applicable. The rate is exactly same 0.1% in both sections. Clear? So either there would be TDS or there would be TCS if those transactions fall under section 194Q or 206C1H. So it was just an introduction of TCS, that what exactly we are going to discuss under TCS. These are 4 specific sections we need to discuss in detail one by one. Yes, Anil, section 194Q is pending, and of course, there are 2 more sections pending, section 234B and 234C. So first we will complete section TCS provision, then we will discuss the section 194Q, and then we will discuss section 234B and 234C. Do not worry, okay? So back to the provision now. One by one, we will discuss these provision in detail. So tax collection at source, applicability and rates. Sale of certain goods. So that is section 206C1. I told you these are applicable on specified goods and specified license or tender, or we can say services. So if these specific goods are there, then only section 206C1 would be applicable. It says seller of certain goods are required to collect, not deduct. So that is an extra collection which is going to be done in case of TCS from the buyer at a specified rate. Of course, the specific percentage has been mentioned over here. If the goods is alcoholic liquor for human consumption, okay, the rate would be 1%. If these are tendu leaves, the rate would be 5%. If that is timber obtained under a forest lease, the rate would be 2.5%. There are only 3 rates, either 1 or 2.5 or 5%. If the timber obtained by any mode other than point number C, so that means if timber obtained other than forest lease, the rate would be 2.5%. Any other forest produce not being timber or tendu leaf, because timber and tendu leaf already been included in above case. So if there is any other forest produced which has been transferred in the definition of goods, the rate would be 2.5%. If there are scrap contract or scrap is the goods, the rate would be 1%. And the last is mineral being coal or lignite or iron ore, the rate would be 1%. If you want to know what is the meaning of tendu leaf, etc., what is the meaning of mineral being coal or lignite, so kindly you can Google it. You will find out the meaning of each of these things. Okay. So now non-applicability is more important. So if the goods fall from point number A to G, then the seller is going to collect TCS as per the specified rate which has been mentioned over here. But there are some cases there are non-applicability. It says no TCS applicability if these goods are going to be used for manufacturing purpose. If the buyer purchasing it for manufacturing of any article or thing or for generation of electricity. So I am a buyer, suppose I am purchasing these goods for the manufacturing of any other article or for generation of electricity, then there would not be any TCS applicability. But if these are going to be purchased for trading purpose, then of course TCS would be applicable. So you can see no collection of tax shall be made under section 206C in the case of a resident buyer. The buyer should be resident buyer. If such buyer furnished to the person responsible for collecting tax, that means seller, a declaration that I am going to purchase these goods for the purpose of either manufacturing of any other goods or for generation of electricity and not for trading purpose, then TCS need not to be collected. And verified in the prescribed manner, etc., above are to be utilized for manufacturing, processing, production, article or thing, or for the purpose of generation of power and not for trading purpose. So if it is for trading purpose, TDS going to be TCS going to be applicable. Okay. So this non-applicability you have to remember in the examination if that has been mentioned that the buyer has purchased for the purpose of generation of electricity or for manufacturing of any other article or thing, then there would not be any TCS applicability. Clear? So those were the goods. Now there were some services also. Lease or license of parking lot, toll plaza, mine or quarry. So TCS would be applicable if any kind of there are parking lot or toll plaza or mine or quarry to another person for the use of such parking lot or toll plaza. So that tender has been issued for the purpose of parking lot, toll plaza. So the TCS need to be paid by the buyer to the seller if this condition has been fulfilled, and the rate would be 2% in this case of services contract. So for the purpose of goods, it is 1% either or 2.5% or 5%. But in case of services, these three tender or services has been included and the rate of TCS would be 2%. That was section 206C1. Now the section is 206C1F. That is for motor vehicle. If the value exceeding 10 lakh rupees and the provision says that every person being a seller who receive any amount, now seller will be the dealer of the car showroom owner, a consideration for sale of a motor vehicle of a value exceeding 10 lakh shall at the time of receipt of such amount collect 1% from the buyer for the such sale consideration. Now government has earlier included only section 206C1F only motor vehicle. But now from 1st January 2025 it has been mentioned that motor vehicle and any other specified or notified goods. So government can notify any other goods also under section 206C1F. If it wants, the government can notify other goods also. So the power has been provided under this section. The scope of section 206C1F has been expanded to include every person being a seller who receive any amount as consideration for sale of any other notified goods exceeding the 10 lakh rupees and the rate would be 1%. So now we can say the exact section is sale of motor vehicle and any other notified goods. So notified goods is on or after 1st January 2025. So up to 31st December 25, only motor vehicle was there. But now from 1st January, if government wants, they can also notify any other goods required to direct TCS, required to collect TCS under section 206C1F. Now section 20C1G, that is for LRS. So remittance under LRS scheme, that is liberalized remittance scheme of the RBI. In a scheme in which government can allow a buyer, a person who is resident in India, to remit amount outside India for any specific or notified purposes. Only for some notified purposes. I guess the limit under this scheme is $250,000 in a financial year. Earlier it was 25,000, but I guess this has been extended up to 250,000 rupees in a financial year or a previous year. So I can remit up to this specified amount of money outside India for some specific purposes only. And if it is been done, then TCS needs to be paid by me. So suppose I am Mr. A, I need to transfer this amount outside India for some education purpose of my children or some medical reason or some any other purpose. Suppose, fine. So I will remit that amount via dealer, via registered dealer of RBI. So I will ask him to remit this amount outside India. So he will collect TCS from me extra on or above the specified limit what we are going to discuss. So this $250,000 is not the amount which has been mentioned in Income Tax Act. That's the part of that scheme which has been introduced. So we do not not to do anything with this amount. We just need to remember the limit which is under TCS scheme, which is 7 lakh rupees. If that is more than 7 lakh rupees, the rate would be different. Up to 7 lakh, there would be a different provision. Okay. So 206C1G provides for collection of tax by every person. Now, who would be the every person means an authorized dealer, of course, which has been approved by the RBI, who receive amount under the liberalized remittance scheme of the RBI for remittance from a buyer. Buyer means me, the person who is remitting this amount outside India, being a person remitting such amount. So that is a first case, that is remittance of amount for some specific purpose. The second person being a seller of an overseas tour program package. So if I want to go outside India for a vacation, for a tour, so the person who is the seller, who is providing me that tour package, that is going to be the second person who will collect the TCS from me, who receive any amount from the buyer who purchased the package. So again, in this case, the person who wants to go outside India, he is the buyer. In this case, the person who is paying that amount for the remittance purpose outside India is the buyer. So for the purpose of travel package, the rate is up to 7 lakh is 5%, more than that is 20%. For remittance purpose under LRS scheme, up to 7 lakh, that is no TCS. Exceeding 7 lakh, in some circumstances, it's 5%. In some circumstances, it's 0.5%. And for other cases, it's 20%. So what are those circumstances? We are going to discuss. Clear? So section 2061 was regarding a specified goods like tendu leaves, timber, etc. If it is not for manufacturing or power generation, TCS is going to be collected. Section 206C1F was for motor vehicle exceeding consideration of 10 lakh rupees. Then TCS required to be collected on the whole value. Now section 206C1G is regarding the remittance or is transferring of foreign currency, whether it's via LRS scheme or for a overseas tour package program. Then TCS required to be collected by the authorized dealer or the seller who is selling us the package. So tax has to be collected at the time of debiting or the amount of payment, whichever is of course earlier. Rate of TCS under these schemes are, so for the tour package program, the rate is very simple, up to 5% till 7 lakh rupees. And more than 5%, the rate of TCS collection would be 20%. It's a huge amount. Okay. Now, if under the LRS scheme, for the remittance of amount outside India, no TCS up to 7 lakh rupees. For first 7 lakh rupees of remittance, there would not be any TCS. For the purpose of education or medical treatment, if you remitted the amount exceeding 7 lakh rupees, for the purpose of education or medical treatment, the rate would be 5% of the amount or aggregate of amounts in excess of 7 lakh. Clear? If the amount remitted is out of loan, now you are providing this amount for remittance, but it is not your amount. You took a loan from a bank, and now that loan amount has been remitted outside India. For section 80 is specified. So deduction section 80 is for repayment of loan. So interest deduction you can claim. So if the loan has been taken from any financial institution which has been approved under section 80E, then the rate of TCS would be lower, very low. That is 0.5% of the amount, which is exceeding 7 lakh rupees. If any other case, if you are remitting amount for any other case, suppose you want to purchase a imported car, etc., any other purpose other than these purpose, then the rate would be 20% exceeding the 7 lakh rupees. Now it's a very important clarification there, also mentioned in the question answer in the above page, in the next pages, in which it has been mentioned that this 7 lakh rupees is not separate for all these. It's not 7 lakh for this, 7 lakh for this, 7 lakh for this. No, this is aggregate 7 lakh rupees. So for example, if somebody has paid 5 lakh rupees for A category, suppose this is A, suppose this is A1 and this is B, clear? So if I paid 5 lakh rupees for A in the same financial year, then the rate would be 20%. Exceeding 7 lakh rupees. For first 7 lakh rupees of remittance, there would not be any TCS. For the second 7 lakh rupees of remittance, there would be 20%. there would not be any TCS. Clear? Then I have paid 4 lakh rupees for A1 category. So up to 5 lakh, there was no TCS. And out of this 4 lakh, or suppose this is not 4, this is 6 lakh. Clear? This 6 lakh, then total exemption limit was 7. So out of those 7, 5 has been exhausted over here. Again, I am paying for some amount for A1 category. So out of this 6, 2 lakh would be no TCS. Because 5 has been there, total benefit was 7 lakh. Out of this 7, 5 has been utilized over. Out of this 6, 2 lakh not required to any TCS. But balance 4 lakh is required to TCS at the rate of 0.5%. Because this fall under A1 category. Now suppose in the same year again, we transferred 3 lakh rupees for any other purpose, like for imported a car. So in that case, now 7 lakh limit has been exhausted, and this will fall under the B category, and the TCS rate would be 20%. So this 7 lakh is in aggregate. If you remitted firstly 5 lakh rupees for A purpose, then the limit would be exhausted by 5 lakh. Remaining 2 lakh could be utilized thereafter for A1, or it would be for B. Suppose if 3 lakh has been transferred before this 2 lakh, this 6 lakh. Suppose this 3 lakh has been transferred before this 6 lakh. Then out of this 3 lakh, 2 lakh would be exempted, and 1 lakh is going to be TCS collection purpose, that the rate would be 20%. And then after this 6 lakh is going to be collection for tax 0.5%. So this 7 lakh limit is in aggregate for all these points. Point number A, point number A1, we can say that, or point number B. We have the solved example also for this provision. So it is very important to understand that this limit is not technically separate provided. So there are certain cases in which there would not be any TCS. No TCS. So no TCS by the authorized dealer on an amount in respect of which the sum has been collected by the seller. So suppose we are trying to remit the amount under LRS scheme, but the seller to whom we are transferring this amount, he is collecting the TCS from us and going to deposit to the government. Then authorized dealer does not need to collect any amount for the purpose of TCS. So technically we are saying if the TCS has been collected by the seller, then dealer does not require to collect the TCS again. No TCS if the buyer is liable to deduct the TDS at source. So if there are TDS provision applicable, in any of this case, if TDS provision is applicable, then there is no requirement for TCS. No TCS if the buyer is the government. So government will not pay any TCS to anyone, and government will not allow anyone to deduct TDS from itself. So government departments are always outside the purview of tax provision. So if government is covering under TCS provision, if government is the buyer under TCS provision, then there would not be any TCS applicability. You cannot charge TCS from government. And if government is a payee, then as a payer, you cannot deduct the TDS from government amount. We would have been gone through with the provision in the last session that suppose if the government, if we took a loan from bank, so now we are going to pay interest to the bank. So now we are the payer and bank is the payee. So we cannot deduct the TDS also. So government are always outside the purview of these things on which they need to pay tax or they need the deduction out of the tax. They are always there as a seller, but not as a buyer. Now section 206C1H. Before this section, we have to understand section 194Q. So we have to go back to understand section 194Q. I can explain you section 194Q separately once, and then we will discuss it with the help of the notes, as I have covered everything, whatever has been mentioned in section 194Q in the notes. So first we will understand section 194Q. Then we will discuss section 206C1H. And automatically then you will understand what is the connection, what is the linkage between these two sections. So 194Q say the nature of payment. What kind of transaction falls under section 194Q? So it's a purchase of goods. Clear? It would be applicable. This section would be applicable if the value is exceeding 50 lakh rupees in any previous year. Clear? The payer who can deduct the TDS. Understand, we are discussing now TDS section. So there would be deduction. So payer, that would be the buyer, of course. In case of purchase of goods, who is going to pay? The buyer is going to pay. So buyer would be the person if his sale exceeding 10 crore. 10 crore in preceding previous year. That means in previous year 23-24. So if I am a buyer, if I'm purchasing goods more than rupees 50 lakh from a seller, and if my turnover is exceeding 10 crore rupees in the preceding previous year, who should be the pay? The pay should only be the resident. We need not to check any other condition on pay. That must be a resident. What is the rate? The rate is very low, 0.1% of value exceeding 50 lakh rupees. Clear? Not applicable. In certain case, that is not applicable if TDS has been deducted under any other provision. Clear? If TCS applicable under section 206C1. That means if the goods are tenduliv, etc., then the provision of section 206C1 would be applicable, or 1F or 1G. Except, so section 194Q is having the overriding effect on section only 206C1H. If TCS needs to be deducted under section 206C1, 1F or 1G, then 194Q would not be applicable. But if that applicability is section 206C1H, then 194Q would be having overriding effect on section 206C1H. So third point, elaborate this. If 206C1H and 194Q both applicable, as they are satisfying the condition, all condition under section 206C1H and 194Q both, then 194Q would be applicable or it will overrule. Now, what is section 206C1H? After that, you understand the correlation between these 2 points. Now, section 206C1H says sale of goods. If there is a sale of goods exceeding 50 lakh, that is from the point of view of buyer, because he needs to deduct, he is the payer. Now, TCS is always going to be collected by the seller. So, it is from the point of view, the POV is seller. Under 194Q, the POV is buyer. So it say if I am a seller and if I sell goods to someone exceeding 50 lakh rupees in a previous year, except goods covered under section 206C1, 1F, 1G. These are overruling effect. Then seller will collect TCS. In this case, seller will collect TCS at the rate of same rate 0.1% exceeding 50 lakh rupees. But the seller's sale should exceed 10 crore rupees in preceding previous year 23-24. Now you can understand the transactions are same. This is the common thing. If I am a buyer And if I'm paying someone for purchase of goods more than 50 lakh rupees in any financial year, then TCS would be applicable. If that buyer turnover exceeding 10 crore rupees, then buyer will deduct the TDS. Suppose the buyer turnover does not exceed 10 crore, his turnover is 8 crore. Then we will see from the point of view of seller, because the transaction is common. This transaction is common. It is someone's sale, it is someone's purchase. So this is the common thing. Now we have to see the from the point of view of buyer. If buyer turnover exceeding 10 crore, then he will deduct the TCS 0.5%. And suppose the buyer turnover is only 8 crore and the seller turnover is more than 10 crore, then he will collect 0.1% from the buyer. So if you will understand with the help of a simple example, suppose Mr. B is the buyer and Mr. S is the seller. Transaction between these two persons are for rupees 60 lakh in a financial year 24-25. So technically, this is the buying purchase of goods value from S point of view, that's the selling point of value. Now, suppose in financial year 23-24, the sale is suppose 12 crore of this one and seller sale was 14 crore. Now you can see both section applicable because a condition has been fulfilled. This is exceeding 50 lakh rupees, clear? His turnover exceeding 10 crores. And again, his turnover also exceeding 10 crores. So we can see that in this situation, section 194Q is applicable as well as section 206C 1H is also applicable. So what will happen? This will prevail. So that means TDS would be deducted by the buyer 0.1% of the value exceeding the 50 lakh rupees. Clear? This was the first case. Now suppose his turnover is only 8 crore. His turnover is 12 crore. Now you can see 194Q cannot be applicable. Even transaction value is 60 lakh, but buyer definition does not allow Mr. B to fall under section 194Q. So what will happen? Now he will collect 206CH. 1H would be applicable. He would collect TCS 0.1% from the buyer, of course. And suppose third situation you can understand like this. Turnover is 8 crore, turnover is 9 crore. Now neither 194Q is applicable nor 206CH1 is applicable. So TDS or TCS would not be collected under this section. If any other section is applicable, like it is a motor vehicle or suppose it's a tend to leave, etc., whatever it is, then TCS could be collected, but section 194Q and 206CH1 would not be applicable. Understood the correlation between section 194Q and 206C1H is there? You can go through with the provision because I have almost written the same provision which has been mentioned under the notes for section 194Q. So not need to revise from the notes again. We will discuss section 206H1 from the notes. So transaction is same, 50 lakh, more than 50 lakh sale or purchase, but the point of view is different. If the buyer has satisfying the condition, then TDS provision would be applicable. If he is not going to satisfy the condition, then of course section 206(1)(h) could be applicable. So as per section 206(c)(1)(h), tax is also required to be collected by a seller who receive any amount as consideration for sale of goods, aggregate of such value exceeding 50 lakh in a previous year other than exported goods. So these goods are not covered under section 1(1)(f) or 1(g). Next, tax to be collected at 0.1%, exceeding the value of 50 lakh rupees. Tax is, however, not required to be collected. Buyer is liable to deduct the TDS. So if section 194Q is applicable, then TCS section would not be applicable in this case. Power to issue guidelines. So CBDT has issued some guidelines in the form in order to clarify the queries or the confusion which might arise on the applicability of section 206V, 1G, 1H, etc. So these have been given in the question and answer form. रजत को अभी याद आया है, नए साल की शुभकामनाएं 2025 की। बहुत बढ़िया रजत, आपको भी बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं। क्लियर। So technically 194Q, when students go through with the section of section 194Q and then they read section 206C, 1, 1F, 1G, 1H. So they must be very confused. They might be very confused that what is the applicability of these section, why they are correlating. But if you need to understand these section, then always do one thing. Skip section 194Q. Whenever you are revising your TDS provision, skip section 194Q. First of all, cover all other section except section 194Q. Then complete section 2061C, 1F, 1G. Then when you start reading section 1206C, 1H, before that only read section 194Q and then understand section 206C, 1H. So that will remove all the confusion which you will might have if you read section 194Q earlier and then go for section 206C TCS provision. So multiple clarification, multiple provisions, comparison has been given in study material for the clarification, for removal of your doubt in these sections. Like important question I will take, so you will understand what is the provision going to be applicable. So first is whether payment through overseas credit card would be the part of LRS scheme, the liberalized remittance scheme. The answer would be of course no. That is applicable on remittance, not the use of credit card anywhere. So you can go through with this question. So question number 2 is asking whether the limit of 7 lakh would be applicable separately for medical, education, etc., or it is an aggregate. So they are separate for tour package. For tour package, 7 lakh is separate. Up to this 5 lakh is 5%. Sorry, up to 7 lakh it's 5%, and exceeding that 20%. But for LRS scheme, this 7 lakh is in aggregate. I have explained you already for this provision. So it has been mentioned that for LRS scheme, the first 7 lakh having no TCS. And after that, it could be 0.5%, 5% or 20%, depend upon the purpose of the remittance. Then again, they are asking whether 7 lakh is separate or aggregate. And for that purpose, it has been mentioned, there's a problem that could be arise, that how would a dealer would come to know that whether you have utilized the limit earlier also or not. If suppose I am a dealer and some clients come to me that I want to remit 5 lakh rupees outside India for the purpose of education. Now, how dealer will come to know that how much out of 7 lakh he has been utilized earlier? So the question regarding this, and it explained that government is trying to make a software so that the limit which has been utilized by you would be updated on that software or on that portal. Till now, the dealer responsibility is this, that he will take an undertaking from you that how much you have utilized. And in future, if that undertaking is a false, then you would be a assessee in default. So question number 3 is for procedural respect. You can go for it. Now there is threshold of 7 lakh for remittance of LRS for TCS to become applicable when there is another threshold of 7 lakh for purchase of overseas program package where reduced rate of 5% of TCS applicable. Whether these two threshold apply independently, the answer is of course yes. For tour package and LRS, these 7 lakh rupees is different exemption limit. Okay. Question number 5 is simple. You can go through it yourself. Question number 7 is also very simple. You can go through with it. Question number 7. They're asking what is the meaning of package. So overall tour program package means at least 3 out of these 2 need to be included for the purpose of liability of TCS. Out of these 3 activities, if you're going outside India and you are booking a tour package, and out of these 3 activities, at least 2 must be included in the tour package. Only in that situation, TCS could be collected by the tour operator. Now there are certain meanings of certain terms. What is the meaning of overseas tour program package? You can go through it. Then what is the meaning of buyer for section 206C1H? What is the meaning of buyer for section 206CH? So it says if the buyer is A, B or C, that means government. You cannot collect TCS from the government, of course. So no TCS if buyer is either point number A or point number B or point number C under section 206C1H. For section 206C1, that is for Tendu leave, etc., it again says if the buyer is either government, etc., you cannot collect TCS from them. So there is no TCS. Again, for section 206C1F, that means that motor vehicle case, if the buyer falls under the definition of central government, etc., there could not be any TCS ever. I told you, government would not allow to collect any tax from themselves, and government will not allow to deduct any tax from their income also. So because in TCS, they could not be buyer, and again under TDS, they could not be payee. Same provision, no TCS. Now, seller, from the point of view of seller, section 206C1H says, from the point of view of seller who are includable. So everyone has been included except if notified by government, anyone. So these all are inclusive in the definition of seller because seller needs to collect the TCS. So government, etc., everyone has been included in the definition of seller for section 206C1F for motor vehicle case. Clear? So they are included. TCS apply. But individual or HUF, only those will included, those turnover exceeding 1 crore or 50 lakh rupees. Clear? Scrap, the meaning of scrap has been mentioned over here. Now, higher rate of TCS for non-furnishing of pen and higher rate of TCS for non-submitting of ITR. Same provision copy paste as has been mentioned in the TDS provision. The rate would be twice the rate or 5%. But if it is section 206(1)H, then the higher would be 1. Whichever is higher would be the TCS rate. If they are not filing return of income, then the rate would be again same at twice or 5%. However, the maximum rate cannot exceed the 20% in any case. Meaning of a specified person, you can go through with this yourself. Then there are some more clarification that whether TCS 1% on sale of motor vehicle at retail level or also on sale of motor vehicle by manufacturers to dealer. So when manufacturer transfer motor vehicle to dealers, there would not be any TCS provision. The TCS is applicable when motor vehicles has been transferred at retail level. That's a very interesting clarification. You can go through it, of course. Next, the TCS 1% on sale of motor vehicle is applicable only to luxury car? No, it is applicable on all car having consideration more than 10 lakh rupees. So these are very simple question to clear the concept, or if there is any query in your mind. So that has been given in the question answer form. Question number 2, 3, 4. Again, whether government will be covered for TCS. If government is the buyer for car, of course, there could not be possible. So there would not be any liability in case of TCS for certain cases like United Nations, embassies, consulates, high commission legislation, etc., etc. So they ask whether TCS is applicable on each sale of motor vehicle. The answer is yes. Of course, that is applicable for each sale of motor car. The aggregate would not be considered. You can go through with these questions, very simple question, just to clarify that certain confusion, certain doubts, it has been clarified over here. Now there are some clarification for section 206C1H. Now suppose there is a dealer and there is a buyer. In exercise of the power to issue guidelines, CBDT has, with the approval of central government, the following guidelines is for removing certain difficulties. Applicability of sale on motor vehicle. So it says in case of section 206C1F, you can collect TCS only if the consideration for motor vehicle is exceeding 10 lakh rupees. So suppose the consideration does not exceed 10 lakh rupees individually, but the consideration has been exceed 50 lakh rupees. So whether section 206C1H could be applicable? The answer is yes, because 206C1H is applicable for all kinds of goods. The provision says the provision of section 206C1F apply to sale of motor vehicle, the value exceeding 10 lakh. Section 206C1H exclude from its applicability goods covered under section 206C1F. It may be noted that scope of section 206C1H and 1F are different. While section 206C1F is based on a single sale of motor vehicle, but 1H is for aggregate value of 50 lakh rupees from a buyer. Hence, in order to remove difficulty that whether all motor vehicle are excluded from the applicability of section 206(1)H, it is clarified that receipt or such sale consideration, like you understand these provision like this, 206C1F will prevail. Suppose if the value exceeding 10 lakh rupees, then section 206C1F would be applicable over 206C1H. But if individually the value does not exceed 10 lakh rupees, but in the aggregate the value of total purchase or sale has been exceeding 50 lakh, then 206C1H could be applicable. If 206C1F not applicable as motor vehicle does not exceed 10 lakh rupees independently, but in aggregate exceeding 50 lakh, then 206C1H would be applicable for the purpose of TCS collection. So you can go through with this clarification also. Now we have illustration to understand these provision. It's a very good illustration, and this kind of illustration could be asked in the examination. Same illustration could be asked in the examination for this TDS purpose. So Mr. Gupta, a resident Indian, is in retail business and its turnover for financial year 23-24 was 12 crore. He regularly purchased goods from another resident, Mr. Agarwal. So first of all, you have to find out in question that who is the buyer and who is the payer. So Mr. Gupta is a buyer in this question and Mr. Agarwal is the seller. So Mr. Gupta is need to be checked for section 194 Q applicability and Mr. Agarwal would be checked for the purpose of section 206C 1H applicability. Clear? So his turnover is 12 crore in financial year 23-24. And the aggregate payment during the financial year was 95 lakh rupees. In the current financial year, the transaction between these two are 95 lakh rupees. Like this, 20 lakh on fund 6/2024, 25 lakh on 12th August 2024, and 22nd lakh on 23rd 11/2024, and 28 lakh on 25th March 25. So technically, on 1/6/24, it was only 20 lakh, not exceeding 50 lakh limit. Then on 12th August, it's 25 lakh, that means 45 lakh. No section 194Q, no section 206C1H would be applicable till now. Clear? Then on 23rd November, now the value has been exceeding 50 lakh. Now it is 67 lakh. And after that, 28 lakh rupees more. There is no car provision, so section 206C1F or 1G or 1 could not be applicable. Clear? Assume the said amounts were credited to Mr. Agarwal's account in the books, Mr. Gupta on the same date. Mr. Agarwal turnover is 15 crore rupees. So you can see the transaction is exceeding 50 lakh rupees in the financial year. Section 194Q buyer does fall in the definition of buyer as is turnover exceeding 10 CR in financial year 23-24, and even seller is there. So you can see all the condition of section 206C1H and 194Q is applicable, but because both are applicable, so first they are asking you have to tell the TDS or TCS implication. So what would going to be applicable in this case? TDS or TCS? So TDS would prevail. So TDS need to be deducted at the rate of 0.1% twice. Once the limit has been exceeding 50 lakh. So out of this 67 lakh, 50 lakh would be removed. Upon 17 lakh, 0.1% is going to be deducted as TDS by Mr. Gupta. So that is the answer of point number 1. And after that, 28 lakh rupees. So whenever that has been paid, 0.1% of 28 lakh would also need to be deducted by Mr. Gupta if the circumstances are same. So point number 1 answer would be here, of course. Since Mr. Gupta turnover exceeding this one, that one, so turnover exceeding, so no tax is to be deducted under section 194Q on 1st June or August. It will be deducted on November. So on November, 1700 need to be deducted as under section 194Q from the payment which has been exceeding 5 lakh rupees from after that exhausted limit, and 2800 in the month of March when the payment has been made by under section 194Q. You can see the note says specifically in this case is both section applicable. So 194Q would prevail. Now the question say, would your answer be different if Mr. Gupta turnover was 8 crore? So if Mr. Gupta, that means buyer turnover is not 12 crore, suppose it's 8 crore, then 194Q cannot be applicable. So in the same case, section 206C1H would be applicable. And now Mr. Agarwal will collect 0.1% from Mr. Gupta. Amount would be exactly the same, you can see. 1700 and of course the 2800, but the collection would be made by Mr. Agarwal from Mr. Gupta. Now the third point said, what would be your answer if in case 1 and 2 both PAN number has not been furnished? So under section 194Q, which falls under TDS provision, if PAN number is not submitted, then the rate would be 5%. Generally it is 20%. But specifically for section 194Q, it has been mentioned the rate would be maximum 5%. That has been mentioned on page number 7.77 of study material. You can refer it. And again in section 206C1H, if PAN number does not submitted, then the rate higher would be 1%. Generally it's 5, but for the purpose of this section, it is 1%. On page number 7.96, you can check it out that the rate is maximum 1%. So again, if no PAN number has been submitted, the rate would be changed to 5% or 1% accordingly as per point number 3. Now a very interesting table has been prepared by the BOS to make you understand the all provisions of TCS versus TDS under section 194Q. I was really impressed with this kind of presentation which has been done for you only. So you should feel that how BOS, your ICAI is actually working a lot for you only, and they are not charging anything for these kind of facilities they are providing to you, and no institution in India is providing on this scale is providing free classes to any of these students, and they are providing you free classes, notes, and beautifully drafted study material. So they have been prepared you can see comparative provision to make you understand the provision of section 206C1 as well as 1F, as well as 194Q, as well as 206C1H. They have prepared this comparative statement to make you understand the provision at a glance. So there are nothing new is there, but they just trying to make you understand the provision at a glance, so you can understand the difference between these provision. So kindly go through with this diagrammatic presentation, which is in a very specifically wonderfully made to make you understand all the buyer, seller, the limit, the percentage, and definitely after going through with this table, your more confusion will be clear, and I guess that would be a crystal clear picture of section TCS and TDS 194Q. So that has been done. Now we are moving to section 234B and 234C. What we have left in advanced tax provision, that is going to be discussed. Interest for non-payment or short payment of advance tax under section 234B and 234C. After that, we will discuss test your knowledge questions and of course MCQs. Yes, Nitin is saying, sir, short note दी है मॉड्यूल में. Of course, मॉड्यूल इतनी अच्छी तरह ड्राफ्ट है, इतना ब्यूटीफुली वंडरफुली उन्होंने सब चीजें इंक्लूड करी हैं जिससे कि आप लोगों को समझ आए. So they have made the revision recapitulate part, of course. They are making diagrammatic presentation for yours, all the provisions, example, illustration. And now these you have been seen this question answer, the clarification, the guideline which has been provided by the CBDT also, that has also been comprised in the study material. तो इससे अच्छा और कुछ है ही नहीं. I am suggesting you सिर्फ स्टडी मटेरियल को अच्छी तरह तैयार करो. सारे क्वेश्चन, टेस्ट योर नॉलेज, ऑल इलस्ट्रेशन, वो सारे करो. प्रीवियस ईयर 5 अटेम्प्ट्स के सारे क्वेश्चंस एक बार लगा लीजिए. आरटीपी एमटीपी जो इंस्टीट्यूट आपको निकाल के देगा ना, वो सारे क्वेश्चंस कर लो. दैट इज मोर देन इनफ टू अचीव वेरी गुड मार्क्स इन द एग्जामिनेशन. कोई और नोट्स किसी और बुक को रेफर करने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है. स्टडी मटेरियल इज मोर देन सफिशिएंट एंड बहुत ही अच्छी तरह ड्राफ्ट है, बहुत ही अच्छी तरह. तो प्लीज गो थ्रू विद ऑल द प्रोविजन स्टडी मटेरियल. एमआरटीपी अभी शायद मे बी रिविजनरी क्लास भी इंस्टीट्यूट लगाएगा बिफोर योर एग्जामिनेशन. उन रिविजनरी क्लास में आपको एमआरटी एमटीपी आरटीपी क्वेश्चंस को भी मैं शायद रिवाइज कराऊंगा, प्रीवियस ईयर के क्वेश्चंस को भी मैं आपको करवाऊंगा. बट बिफोर दैट you have to do one thing, revise these provision, illustration, questions, and अपने आप खुद से last preceding some years के question paper attempt करो. So you will get some confidence that you are able to solve those kind of question. Okay. Now section 234B and 234C we are going to discuss. Page number 7.83. So what was the advanced tax applicability we have discussed in the last class? Ambeshwari is also saying correct. Chapter is small, but it gives more clarification. So student thought that it is big. Of course, that's so true. The provisions are not that much, but when institute draft a study material, they try to explain each and every detail with you, like the meaning of buyer, meaning of seller, meaning of scrap, everything they want to explain to you, that if any one of you want to understand the whole scenario, the meaning of those terms, so there could not be anywhere else. You could just have the study material, everything is there. So you need not to refer any other book, etc. That's why study material, you might think it's very huge, but technically it's not huge. It's comprised each and everything with you. Okay, so sir, in TDS, except 194Q, 20% rate will be applied if pen not furnished. Yes, absolutely correct, Mr. Hardik. Okay, so last in advanced tax, what was the applicability of advanced tax? When advanced tax is applicable, who will answer this question? When advanced tax will be applicable? I'm waiting. Who will answer this? When advanced tax will be applicable? What is the applicability of advanced tax provision? Hardik is saying to all person except senior citizen who do not have PGBP. That's not completely correct, Hardik. Sanjay is saying tax liability is 10,000 or more. It is not also correct completely, Sania, sorry. Anyone else? That exception of CCT, then leave it. I'm just wanted to know before that exception, those are exemption. I'm just asking what is the basic applicability of advanced tax? It is if your estimated, if your estimated tax liability, the word should be estimated tax liability. It cannot be your tax liability because you are not able to find out the correct tax liability. It would be your estimated tax liability, which we need to calculate on 15th of June, then September, then December, and then March. So if your estimated tax liability is exceeding or more than or equal to 10,000, then advanced tax provision would be applicable. It is not applicable in case of senior citizen having no business income, etc. But you should understand if the estimated tax liability exceeding 10,000 rupees. So the advanced tax provision says, we have discussed in the last class also, that if your estimated tax liability exceeding or equal to 10,000, then advanced tax provision would be there. Clear? There are specific date like 15th of June, then 15th of September, then 15th of December, then 15th of March. You need to deposit a certain percentage of your estimated tax liability, 45%, 15%, 75%, and 100%. Clear? If you fall under section presumptive taxation scheme, then only this is applicable. That is, they need to deposit only once the advance tax, that would be 100%. So those were the provision what we have discussed in the last class. Now we are discussing section 234B and section 234C. That is for interest in case of advance tax. Both are applicable in case of advance tax default. So interest would be applicable if there is advance tax default. Then interest under section 234B or 234C or both could be applicable. Now when 234B would be applicable? Before that, to calculate interest on anything, we need basic 4 information. First one, the applicability. That when this provision is going to be applicable. Fine. So the applicability we should know. That when section 234 would be applicable. We know that is for default in advance tax payment. But what kind of default we should know, then only we would be able to find out whether interest need to be calculated or not. So because both section is for advance tax default, 234B as well as 234C. But when 234B would be applicable, when we need to applicable 234C, that we should know. So first thing is applicability. The second is interest rate. We should know what kind of interest rate we need to apply to calculate the interest value. The third one is amount. The amount on which interest rate need to apply. What would be the fourth point? What is the fourth technical thing we need to know when to calculate interest anywhere or in any circumstances? It's not about the interest in case of section 234B or C. In any kind of interest calculation, what is the fourth element we need? Exactly, Pallavi is saying correct. Hardik is also saying correct. Sani is also saying correct. Time duration. The time period, the time duration, what kind of or what time we should consider to calculate the rate of interest and the amount. So these 4 things we need to know to calculate interest in any situation, whether it's a house property, pre-construction period interest, or a 234 BC interest, or in any kind of interest, we need to know these 4 things to calculate interest value. So first of all, we need to know when 234B interest need to be calculated. The applicability say if advance tax paid is less than 90% of your assessed tax. So whatever is your actual tax, assessed tax, if your advance tax paid less than 90% on this date, on 15th March, how much advance tax need to be paid? It should be 100% of your estimated tax liability. Now you suppose you only deposit less than that. Suppose your assessed tax is, suppose 1 lakh for the previous year. So 234B interest would be applicable only if at this date the advance tax deposit is less than 90,000. If you deposit 95,000 up to 15th of March or between 15th March till 31st of March, even if the total aggregate is 95,000, then 234B interest would not be applicable. So for the purpose of 234B interest, we will only check this date, only this date. I do not have any problem. Whatever has been deposited on this date, whether you deposit something or not, does not matter for applicability of section 234B. Whether you deposit 0% over here, 0% over here, 0% over here, and you deposit 100% over here, or even 95,000, 95%. So there would not be any 234B interest. If the advance tax has been deposited, suppose on 15th March, assessed tax was 1 lakh and you deposit 80,000. Then yes, advance tax interest 234B provision would be applicable. So 234B say only one thing, that if on the last installment time, that is on 15th March or up to 31st of March, clear? If the amount of advance tax is less than 90% of your assessed tax, then there would be 234B interest. So why this provision has been made? That you should estimate your tax liability correctly. If you are just making estimate tax liability, okay, fine, we will assume that my tax would be 1 lakh. And suppose the assessed tax would be 2 lakh rupees. So you have to calculate your advance tax liability cautiously. You have to calculate your advance tax liability sincerely. Not like that you just assume that my tax would be okay 1,50,000. So let me deposit 1,45,000. And suppose your assessed tax is 3 lakh rupees. So there would be a case where your advance tax interest need to be paid. And let me tell you, it would be a huge amount. How it would be a huge amount? Because the time duration is very long in this situation. So suppose in first case, we deposit 95,000. Assessed tax is 1 lakh. So there would not be any advance tax 234B interest. Suppose the second case, we deposit only 80,000. Then of course the applicability would be there. Now the rate of interest is 1% per month or part of the month. So if you delay for 1 month and 10 days, 2-month calculation will be done because part of the month. If you are delayed for 3 months and 4 days, still 4-month calculation, that would be 4% interest need to be charged. So interest rate is 1% per month or part of the month. Clear? Now the amount, on which amount this need to be calculated. So it says your assessed tax less advance tax paid, any TDS paid, any relief under section 89, any AMT credit. AMT you will be understand in chapter number 9. So if any kind of these tax has been paid, that needs to be deducted. The balance amount is required to be calculated for the purpose of advance tax interest under section 234B. So in our case, assessed tax is suppose 1 lakh. And advance tax we deposit only 80,000. No TDS etc. was there. So what is the amount on which interest need to be calculated? Of course, 20,000. So we have the rate of interest 1% per month of part of the month. We have the amount, we have the applicability. Now last thing is the time duration. For which time duration or for what time duration interest need to be calculated. The provision says the time duration would be fixed. It says the time duration would be from 1st April of assessment year. So for your examination, the time duration, the interest need to be calculated from start date would be 1st April 2025 and it would be end on some date. 1st April 2025 The end date would be as income determined. It will be given in question under section 143(1) or regular assessment has been made, as the case may be. So this date would be given in the question, or self-assessment tax made. We can also take this also. Self-assessment tax paid. So starting date would be this. This time duration would be given in the question. Suppose the income determination has been done on 10th October 2025. So amount I have 20,000. Rate is 1% per month or part of the month. Now the time we need to calculate from April, May, June, July, August, September, and 10 days of October. So technically 6 months and 10 days. But we will take full 7 months. So the rate would be 7%. So amount is 20,000. 7% would be the rate of interest. So technically I need to pay interest on advance tax under section 234B would be 1,400 rupees. That would be the interest under section 234B. So you might be thinking that what is the need of paying advance tax on these date? I would not deposit any advance tax on June, September or December, and I will deposit 100% on 15th March. So there would not be any advance tax interest under section 234B, because if you deposit more than or equal to 90% on the 15th of March installment, there would not be any advance tax interest under section 234B. So why do we need to deposit a specific percentage on these dates? These are irrelevant. Exactly, these are irrelevant for the purpose of 234B, but these are relevant for 234C. Now, 234C say this, that if the specific installment which has been prescribed under advance tax provision does not paid on these specific dates, then interest under section 234C is going to be imposed. So if you did not deposit anything on these dates, then automatically interest under section 234C would be applicable. So now you understand the provision of section 234C. This is some interesting provisions are there. So for the purpose of advance tax, there are date 15th June, 15th September, 15th December, and 15th March. And the percentage is 15%, 45%, 75%, and 100%. So technically, if I will ask you that 234C interest applicability is on the basis of these specific percentage. So to avoid 234C interest, on 15th June, how much amount of advance tax liability we should deposit to avoid any interest under section 234C? On 15th June, if I want to avoid interest under section 234C, then how much amount of tax as a percentage we need to deposit? Of course, the correct answer would be 15%. Anil is saying 15, Kasak is saying 15. And everybody, of course, going to tell that that is 15%. But there is some drafting problem. I don't know how it happened. But it says interest would be applicable under section 234C if the advance tax has been deposited less than 12%. Please do not ask me why 12%. There must be some drafting mistake, or if there's some logic behind this 12%, I do not know. Only the lawmakers know. But I personally feel that is a drafting mistake. I don't know why it happened. Okay. So it should be 15%. That if it is less than 15%, logical, technical, or by any means, it should be 15%. But I don't know why it's 12%. So interest would be applicable if advance tax liability on 15th June has been deposited less than 12%. Suppose on 15th June, the advance tax liability was full year was 1 lakh. So advance tax provision will say, okay, 15,000 need to be deposited. Advance tax provision will say. And if somebody will ask, okay, if I will not deposit 15,000, what will happen? So 234C says, okay, we will charge interest. We say, okay, okay, you can charge interest. We went to 234C, okay, sir, what kind of interest? So he will say, I will charge interest if you deposit less than 12%. Suppose I have deposit 14,000 on this date. That means 14% I have deposited. So when you read section of advance tax liability, you will feel that you are violate the provision. You are at default because the requirement was 15% and you deposit 14%. So advance tax will say now go to section 234C. They will charge interest upon you. We say, okay, sorry, we will go to 234C. We went to 234C. And what it says, if you deposit less than 12%, then only I will charge interest. If that is not less than 12%, you not need to pay any interest under section 234C. So technically in this case, suppose we have deposit 14%. So is there any interest? There would not be any interest liability. Interesting, you know? Okay, suppose he deposit, abhi और interesting होगा. He deposit 10,000. Second case. If he deposit 14%, there would not be any interest. But suppose he deposit 10,000, that means 10%. Clear? Now what will happen? Now interest would be applicable. Now 34C will say, okay, you deposit less than 12%, interest would be applicable. We say, okay. Now for the purpose of amount calculation, one more interesting. When there is calculation of amount, that what amount should be taken for the purpose of interest calculation. So you can see it should be 12% minus 10%. The difference should be 2% because interest should be charged when it is more than 12% and you deposit 10%. So the short amount need to be find out, the shortfall. But it says no, for the purpose of shortfall, we will take 15%. 15% minus 10% you actual deposit. So the difference would be 5,000, not 3,000, not 2,000. Technically, it should be 2,000 because the interest would be less than 12%. So the difference would be 12 minus 10. But say no, for the purpose of applicability, we will check it from 12%. But if you are short than 12%, then for the purpose of calculation, we will again take it from this point of view. Okay, so difference would be 5,000. Now interest need to be calculated. The interest amount and time is very simple in this case. The interest rate is fixed. There is no time duration you need to calculate. The interest rate is fixed 3%. It's not per month, it's not per annum, it's 3%. So technically, if this is 5,000, interest would be 150 rupees straightforward. Understood? You will be able to solve this thing. Okay. So now the second point, suppose the requirement is 45%. But again, there is a mistake. Now it says for the fulfillment of the provision, the rate is 45%. But for the applicability of 234C, it's 36%. If it is less than 36%, we will charge interest under section 234C. So suppose the amount is 1 lakh rupees. Then the total payment, including the payment made above, should be 36% or more. If it is less than 36%, then only interest under section 234C need to be calculated. Again, if it is short amount, for the purpose of short amount, it would be considered from 45% minus advance tax paid. The rate is again fixed 3%. From 15 December, everything has been sorted. Now the problem has been gone. It is If it is less than 75%, now everything has been in line. Then 75% minus advance tax paid. The rate would be fixed 3%. If it is less than 100%, then 100% minus advance tax paid. And the rate for the last month is only 1%. For this 3, for the last month, whatever the short amount, the rate of interest would be only 1%. Clear? Now it's a question whether section 234B and 234C can both interest applicable in same question or in same case? In same question is the better. Is it possible that 234B and C both can be applicable in the same case? The answer is of course yes, because the conditions are different. Suppose somebody's deposit less than 90%, 85% on his last date. Then of course he's not depositing less, he's depositing less than 100%. So 234C is applicable, and because he's an aggregate deposit less than 90%, so 234B would also be applicable. I will also solve a question for the calculation of 234C with proper question in our MCQ numericals. So that would be really helpful to all of you to understand the applicability of section 234C in detail. Okay. So that was section 234B and 234C. And now when we will discuss this provision, from the notes, you'll be able to understand what we are discussing. So interest for non-payment or short payment of above tax, section 234B. Interest in section 234B is attracted for non-payment of advance tax or payment of advance tax of an amount less than 90% of assessed tax. Clear? The interest would be 1% per month or part of the month, and the time duration would be start from 1st April of the following financial year. That means that is fixed. Okay. Following financial year. Your financial year is 24-25. So from the next financial year, 1st April, it will start. So that would be always 1st April 2025. Up to the date of determination of income under section 143(1), this date has been going to be given in the question, of course, or regular assessment is made up to the date of such regular assessment. Interest would be applicable on the difference of assessed tax and advance tax, as well as deduction of TDS, TCS, relief, AMT credit, any tax paid by self-assessment tax, etc. 234C is, of course, manner of computation of interest under section 234C for determination of advance tax by corporate and non-corporate assessee. For those assessee, those fall under presumptive taxation scheme. The 234B or 234C both would be applicable only for a single date, that's on 15th March 2025. So they need not to calculate advance tax interest under section 234B or C on specific dates. There are only one date there is, and that is only one date is 15th March. So C and B both applicable accordingly. Clear? You can go through with this provision of section 234C. The date has been given 15, 45, 75, and 100. And now you will see that 12 and 36% provision. However, if the advance tax paid by SSC on the current income on or before 15 June or 15 September is not less than 12% or 36% of the tax due on the written income respectively, then the assessee shall not be liable to pay any interest on the amount of the shortfall on those dates. So that 12% and 36% would be applicable only for two starting dates. And let me tell you, it's not exactly what we are discussing from where this 12% and 36% has been came. There's a drafting mistake. In my opinion, the reason of this mistake, because earlier, in case of advance tax, the depositing rate was different for corporate assessee and for non-corporate assessee. Let me tell you why this mistake must be there. For non-corporate assessee, the rate was 15%, 45%, 75%, and 100%. And for non-corporate associate, it was earlier, I guess, 12%, 36%, 75%, and 100%. Now, after some time, the advanced tax provision has been combined. These rate has been abolished. So this is for non-corporate and for corporate associate both. And might be the 234C provision was also different earlier for corporate and non-corporate. So by mistake, these rates was applicable for 234C of non for corporate assessee has been mixed up with the 234C provision for both the assessee. So that could be a reason, but for us, for the purpose of examination, that is irrelevant. So we have gone through with all the provision has been completed. Now we have left with test your knowledge question and of course the MCQs, what we are going to discuss, I guess after a short break. Let me see if there is any query. There is no query yet. So Mr. Ashok, sir, can we take a short break of 10 minutes? Thank you so much. I believe you must have your tea, coffee, etc. And we were discussing the provisions of TDS, TCS, and complete section 234B and 234C also. Now moving on to test your knowledge questions. So um, more that will give you more clarification, more clarity regarding the topic what we are discussing. Anil Army is asking, sir, please give us overview of entire TDS, TCS, and advanced tax. Wow, what is the question of Anil? We have already discussed the overview of TDS, TC, and advanced tax before starting each of this topic. So when we started TDS, I have explained what is the concept of TDS. And as I discussed today, the concept of TCS also and advanced tax also has been discussed. So, please scroll the video or watch the full videos of previous sessions so you might get to know the overview, etc. Next is the rebate will not be considered for estimation of advanced tax liability, and if advanced tax is more than 10,000, there is 12,000 tax, so whole amount 12,000 tax should be paid. No, rebate is going to be considered. The amount of estimate tax liability would be calculated, including all the provisions of income tax. Hardik is saying, sir, I am not able to understand 194 IB rate, sir, is proportionate, or sir, we will deduct at the end of the tenancy period. Correct. We will deduct it at the end of the tenancy period or at the end of the financial year, that would be March. So whatever is the rate of TDS at the time of vacate of the property or in March 2025, that rate is going to be applicable for the whole amount of rent, whatever you have paid. Okay. So if that is not vacated, suppose it is not vacated, then it will be always 2% because the March rate is 2%, as the example is also there. And if the vacation has been done before September or up to September, then the rate would be only 5%. I hope it is clear, Hardik. Chalo. So now back to the notes and we will discuss test your knowledge questions. So we have almost 5 test your knowledge questions. One by one, we are discussing these questions. And let me tell you one thing. You might feeling that TDS provisions are so complicated. How you will able to learn the payer, the pay, the amount, the rates, the specific exemption, clarification. So a lot of provisions are there. But when you will see the test your knowledge question or the question those have been asked in the previous year examination, you will feel the question that is going to be asked would be very normal. You just need to know the exact exemptions, the rate of tax, and the amount exceeding which the TDS or TCS is going to be applicable. So let me show you the test your knowledge question. And these test of your knowledge question type question is going to be asked in the examination. And you can see that from your previous attempt question paper. If you see the previous question paper, almost these kind of questions are there. So that is not that difficult. Like you can see, Ashwin doing manufacture and wholesale trade furnished you the following information. The total turnover has been given in 2023-24, 1 crore 5 lakh rupees, and 2024-25, it's 95 lakh rupees. Clear? Examine tax deduction at source. Provisions are attracted for the below said expenses incurred during the financial year 2025. Fine. So you all students have just studied advanced tax, TDS, TCS provision with me yet. I believe that you did not do revision yet. So let's see, are you able to solve these kind of questions or not? And let me tell you, these kind of question is going to be asked in the examination. Okay, so first is interest paid to UCO Bank on 15th August is 41,000. So is it liable to TDS or not? And if not, or if yes, the reason behind it. So this is the first question for all of you. It is paid to bank. Exactly. So bank is not the payer. Bank is pay in this question. So if bank is pay, there would not be any TDS deduction. We cannot deduct the TDS of bank. Bank, if it is a payer, they are going to deduct TDS, but we are the payer and bank is payee. So we cannot deduct any kind of TDS on this. So the correct answer is no TDS. And the reason, because we cannot deduct the specific payee, including the bank. Next is contract payment to Raj, two contract of 12,000 each on 12th December 2024. So first of all, whenever there is a transaction, first of all, you try to find it out which section is going to be applicable under TDS or TCS, etc. So it's a contract payment. So contract payment is under section 194C. First provision has been solved. Now, the payer turnover in the preceding year is more than 1 crore. You can see the information has been given over there. So the payer condition has been fulfilled. Now the amount limit. What is the amount limit under section 194C? It's individually 30,000 or in aggregate 1 lakh rupees. So we are having two contracts of 12,000 each. So neither the 30,000 nor the 1 lakh rupees limit has been reached. So there would not be any TDS. As simple as that. You can see how easy these questions are. I always say this thing in my all batches that when you solve numerical topics, so when you are just revising the concept or when you are learning the theoretical provisions for those kind of numerical topics, you always feel that it is very complicated. But when those questions, those related to these kind of provision in numerical form come in front of you, you will find it out these concepts were not that difficult because we just need to learn the main points and we have to apply those in the numerical topic. The third point is shop rent paid, one pay on 21st January 2025 is 2,50,000. So which section is first going to be applicable under section 194? I is applicable because individual turnover exceeding 1 crore. So what is the limit under section 194 I? The limit is aggregate limit need to be checked. Tambeshwari, very good. 2,40,000. It has been exceeded. So if it has been exceeded, TDS required to be deducted. The rate we should know. Shop is immovable property. So what should be the TDS rate? We have to know that and we need to apply that. As simple as that, TDS would be applicable. Is it difficult? And let me tell you, these are not simple or easy questions. These are the kind of question which is going to be asked in examination. You can see the previous examination, only this kind of question is going to be asked from the TDS topic right till now. Now, commission paid to Balu on 15th March 2025, 7,000 rupees. Which section is going to be applicable? 194H. Well done, Pallavi. Well done, Hardik. Well done, Tambeshwari. Now, what is the limit? The limit is 15,000 and the commission is 7,000. So what should be the answer? No TDS. So this kind of question would be an examination about 2 or 3 marks at least. And I believe that if these kind of question is going to be asked in the examination, you should score full out of full marks. If that's a 3 marks question or 4 marks or 2 marks, you have to score full marks in these kind of question. Chalo, second पे आते हैं. Compute the amount of tax deduction at source on the following payments made by Messrs S Limited. Look, under TDS, it's very important to understand who is payer. Messrs S Limited, because it is other than individual HUF. So the turnover of 23-24 is irrelevant now in most of the cases. During the financial year 24-25, as per the provision of Act 1951. The first is on 1st October 2024, payment of rupees 2 lakh to Mr. R, our transporter who owns 8 goods carriages throughout the previous year and furnish a declaration to this effect along with his PAN number. Like numericals have this kind of specialty. They try to explain themselves. They try to make you understand, look, what information I am giving to you. Please recall those information. So it's trying to make you understand that I am a transporter. I am having only 8 goods carriages. I have furnished my pen number. So they are trying to give you a lot of hints. They are trying to give you hints. The question gives you hint. मिस्टर अशोक, कोई अनम्यूट है क्या? पीछे से बैकग्राउंड में कोई साउंड आ रहा है? मिस्टर, somebody is unmuted. प्लीज जो भी अनम्यूट है, प्लीज बैकग्राउंड साउंड को रोक दीजिए. जय लक्ष्मी. चलो भाई. Okay, so we were discussing the provision. Where are we? Over here. Fine. So the beautiful characteristics of a numerical is they try to explain itself. That look, I am giving you hint that I am a transporter. I am having only 8 goods carriages. So find it out whether there are some provision regarding this concept, and I am also furnished my pen number. So technically, which provision going to relate with it? The provision of section 194C. It says if there is a case of a transporter who is owning or plying or hiring of goods carriages having not more than 10 goods carriages at any time during the previous year and has submitted the pen, then there would be no TDS. Clear? Next. Now payment of fees for technical services. Now the case of S limited, so it is not individual. So section 194M would not be applicable. So payment of technical fees, which section is applicable? Section 194J is applicable. And the payment is 25,000 and royalty of 20,000. So this payer is paying 25,000 for technical fees and 20,000 for royalty. So what is the amount limit under section 194J? Individually, it is 30,000. Correct, Nitin? Correct, Tambeshwari? Correct, Hardik? And in the both case, it does not exceed. Correct, Kasek? So in both situations, there is no requirement of TDS deduction. No TDS requirement because limit does not exceed. Next, 30th June 2024, payment of 25,000 to Messrs X Limited for repair of building. So which section should be there? Section 194C because repair is a work contract, correct? And of course, what is the limit? The limit is 30,000, does not exceed it and does not exceed it. So that means there would not be any TDS also. Clear? The fourth condition, payment of 2 lakh rupees made to Mr. A for purchase of diaries made according to specification of Messrs S Limited. However, no material was supplied for such diaries to Mr. A by Messrs S Limited and its associate. So which section is applicable in this case? Hardik is saying 194C. Ambeshwari is saying again 194C. Pallavi is also saying 194C. Did you read the question correctly, all of you? Hardik, Tambeshwari, and Pallavi. I am saying it's C. It does not mean that it is correct. Okay, Tambeshwari, Sania is saying 194Q. 194Q would be applicable if it's more than 50 lakh rupees. And the turnover of buyer must exceeding 10 crore rupees. There is no turnover information has been given. So how we can apply section 194Q? So first of all, you have to see the applicability. So which section is going to be applicable in this case? Any idea? 194C would be applicable for work contract. So what work is there? We did not even supply the material. We paid 2 lakh rupees to Mr. A. For what? For purchase of diaries. So we are just purchasing the finished goods. Even it's not mentioned that we have supplied the material. If the in question it has been given that material has been supplied by me, then in that case the invoice, if labor has been separately shown, then TDS under section 194C would be on labor charges. That could not be applicable because we did not supply the material also. So it's technically a contract for sale or purchase purely. Specifically, if we need to tell someone about the specification, that does not mean there is a work contract. Suppose if you order to a bakery person that he needs to make a cake for a specific design, and when we go to purchase that cake, so either is the work contract or it's a purchase or sale purely. If you will consider this concept as purchase of diaries according to specification under section 194C, then everything, every material you purchase from almost everything is going to be covered under section 194C. So 194C could be there if there's a separate contract between that company and Mr. A, and as well as the specification and the materials need to be provided by the buyer to the job worker, then it could be considered as a job work contract. But it is just a simple contract of purchase or sale of goods. And if it is a purchase or sale of goods, there could not be any TDS applicability. Even if in this question it has been specifically written that the buyer has supplied the material and only labor charges need to be applied by the seller, then we could say on the labor charges, TDS provision could be applicable under section 194C. But because it is not so, so that would be a sale and purchase. Clear? Next, on 1st January, payment of 2,30,000 made to Mr. Bharat for compulsory acquisition of his house as per law of the state government. So which section is applicable? 194 LA, very good. Either tax need to be deducted or not. What is the limit under section 194 LA? Tambeshwari is saying 2,50,000, Anil is saying correct section, very good. But the limit is 2,50,000. And because that limit has not been exceeded, so there would not be any TDS. Clear? Now, payment of commission 14,000 to Mr. Y. Again, section 194H would be applicable. And you can see the limit is 15,000 and that limit has not been exceeded. So there again, no TDS requirement. Question number 3rd, it says, examine the applicability of TDS provision and TDS amount in the following cases. Okay, let me tell you one thing. On Monday, we have session for return filing procedure. That is a completely theoretical provision. Fine. And on Wednesday and Friday, there's a chapter number 9, that is calculation of total income and tax liability. So I just want to tell you that before that session, like from Wednesday and Friday, in that session, we are going to discuss all the provision together, like rates of taxes, deduction, set of all the provision would be included in that chapter. So I would recommend, or I will request you to please, before taking that session, please try to cover basic concept chapter. Chapter number 1, only cover the rates of 115 BAC and normal slab rate provision, the surcharge provision from that, the rebate provision from that chapter, and that integration of agricultural income with non-agricultural income. Please revise these topics before taking the classes of Wednesday and Friday, and as well as the capital gain rates provision that we have discussed, capital gain part 2. the rate provision what we have discussed in capital gain chapter, please revise it. If you want to take the maximum benefit of those lecture, if you want to understand what we are going to discuss in those session, it's a request that please go through with this section or these topics, so that would be really easy to you to understand how I am calculating tax, because that's a huge topic. A lot of test your knowledge question we have to solve, and that is going to cover all the provisions of income tax. So whether you are revising set-off, whether you are revising clubbing, whether you are revising PGBP, if it is possible, please revise PGBP also. If it is possible, please revise the PGBP provision also. So if anyone would be able to revise all these provision before the Wednesday session, he would be really in a very good position to understand all the provision that we are going to discuss on Wednesday and Friday classes. Okay. Only revise PGBP, that would be enough, and capital gain rate provisions and basic chapter rate, surcharge, rebate, and integration concept, that would be enough. Okay. Chalo bhai. Example number 3. रिकैपिलेट से कर लो बच्चों, चाहे जैसे भी रिवाइज करना चाहो, बस रिवाइज कर लो इतना कि जब वहां पर मैं टैक्स कैलकुलेट करूं तो यू शुड नॉट आस्क कि सर ये टैक्स स्लैब रेट से कैसे निकल कर आया, या सर ये रिबेट आपने कैसे दी, या सर ये सरचार्ज का कौन सा रेट आपने एप्लीकेबल करा है. So that would be really difficult because we have already discussed those kind of provision in basic concept. So that would be really easy to you to understand what I am doing over there. Okay. Chalo, examine the TDS applicability, TDS amount. Case number 1. Rent paid for hire of machinery by B Limited to Mr. Raman, 2,60,000 on 27/9/2024. That would be under section 194I. And because it's for machine, the rate would be 2% if the total value exceeding 2,40,000. So you can see all the condition has been fulfilled. So technically, we can charge TDS on it. The rate of TDS, the amount of TDS has been explained in the solution part of this test and knowledge questions. You can see later. Next, fee paid on 1st December 24 to Dr. Shri Vastan by Sundar HUF, 35,000 for surgery performed on a member of the family member. So technically, you can see by Sundar HUF, we have given the information because the pair will fall under section 194J. And the limit is 30,000. But the nature of payment is the personal purpose. So there is an exemption under section 194J that if the payment of professional fees is for personal purpose, there would not be TDS applicability. So there would not be any TDS, even the limit of 30,000 has been exceeded. Clear? Even section 194M cannot be applicable because in that case, payment should exceed 50 lakh rupees. Under section 194M, there is no benefit of personal professional fees and personal contract also. But the amount should exceed 50 lakh. That is not in this case. So TDS would not be applicable, not on section 194J as well as section 194M. ABC Company Limited paid 19,000 to one of its director as sitting fees on 1st January 2025. So payment to directors will fall under section 194J. What is the limit? What is the limit? There is again no limit. The 30,000 limit is applicable only for professional fees, technical fees, royalty cases, and non-compete fees. There is no limit for director fees. So whole amount is going to be liable for TDS under section 194J. Example number 4. Examine the applicability of tax deduction at source. Provisions, the rate and amount of deduction in the following cases. Payment made by a company to Mr. Ram, a subcontractor, 3 lakh rupees with outstanding balance of 1,20,000 shown in the books of accounts. The total value is exceeding 1 lakh rupees. So there would be TDS applicability under section 194C at the rate of 1% because the payee is an individual. So technically, the TDS is required to be deducted at the rate of 1% in this case. On rupees, how much? On which amount TDS required to be deducted? For point number 1, 3 lakh. चलो ऑप्शन देते हैं. 3 lakh. First option. Option number 2, 1,20,000. Option number 3, 4,20,000. Option number 4, none. TDS किस पे कटेगा? Manvi is saying 420. Ambeshwari is saying 420. Hardik is saying 3 lakh rupees. The correct answer is 3. 4,20,000. TDS required to be deducted on payment or credit, whichever is earlier. So the already book shows 1,20,000 credit later. The 3 lakh was the amount with outstanding balance of 120. So 120 need to be paid. And because now it exceeded rupees 1 lakh rupees, aggregate amount need to be deducted TDS, that is 4,20,000 rupees at the rate of 1%. It's a good question. Now, winning from horse race 1,50,000 paid to Mr. Sham, an Indian resident. Rate of TDS would be 30%, of course. 45,000 would be the TDS amount. No, Hardik, 1.2 lakh is not included. It is saying payment has been made 3 lakh rupees. And the book shows on 31st March 2025 that remaining 120 also in its balance. So technically 3 lakh to be paid, but 120 has been shown in the books of accounts. So total work done by him for us would be 4,20,000 rupees. Now third is 2 lakh paid to Mr. A resident individual on 22nd February 25 by state of Uttar Pradesh for compulsory acquisition. So 194 LA would be applicable, but it is less than 2,50,000. So in third case, there would not be any TDS. Clear? Fifth point is regarding the provision regarding advanced tax, theoretical provision. All the solutions is over here. So you can go through with the solution in detail if you want to understand or need more clarity. Clear? Fine. So now moving on to the MCQs. I hope you all are ready. First of all, I am going to solve a question of section 234C. Then we will solve other MCQs because these MCQs are very, very easy to solve because we just need to tell the rate of TDS, amount of qualification limit. So I need to cover first the MCQ, which is regarding section 234C. This is MCQ number 34. The question says, Mr. B, age 66 year, files a return of income declaring an income of 10,40,000 for assessment year 25-26. TDS 13920 has been deducted. B is shifting opt out of default tax regime. Advance tax paid details are as under. On 15/6/2020, it's 12,000 paid. On 15 September 24, 36,000 paid. On 15 December, 30,000 more paid. And on 15th of March 25, 25,000 has been paid. So on the basis of this, we have to calculate the interest under section 234C. So let's see. Barna Mandal is asking what is the weightage of this chapter? At least 5 to 6 or 7 marks question is going to be framed for each attempt from this chapter. Okay, at least 5 to 6 or 7 marks question. Senior citizen is not liable to pay advance tax, but because advance tax has been paid, so if it is not running any business income, so definitely he must be running any business income. That's why he's paying advance tax. Okay. Do not ever take a negative assumption. You could assume that this income is agricultural income, so there is no income tax liability. So if there is a question of 3 or 4 marks is there, then you can take only positive assumption. Always do not take negative assumption. Positive assumption means the assumption by which you need to solve the question further. Negative assumption means when you need not to solve the question. So always take positive assumption in the question. Okay. We will solve this question over here. Let me write it down the question, basic information. Just give me a minute. Let me open that question. Okay. So informations are like this. Mr. B, age 66 here. Suppose his business income and TI, it's 10,40,000. TDS has been paid on 13920. He's under optional tax regime. Advance tax paid as follows. On 15th June, it's 12,000. 15th September, paid 36,000. 15th December, 30,000. And 15th March, advance tax paid 25,000. Clear? Sure. First of all, we need to calculate the assessed tax. So we can calculate the tax on this income. So we'll find out the tax liability. So tax on 10,40,000, because he's a senior citizen. So the tax liability would be after including cess, 1,26,880 rupees, including cess. Less TDS has been paid 13920. So 112,960. The balance need to be paid via advance tax. Now, first, the first date would be 15th of June. Applicability of section 234C. When the advance tax has been paid less than 12% of assessed tax. So my tax liability was after deducting TDS, or estimated tax liability after deducting TDS, is 11,209.60 rupees. So the 15% of this value we have to take 11,209.60 into 12%. So 12% of this value, at least the advance tax should be deposit 13,555 rupees on this date. The actual advance tax paid, which has been given in the question on this date, is only 12,000 rupees, which is less than 12%. So if the advance tax paid is less than the 12% of assessed tax, then for the purpose of interest calculation, the short amount need to be calculated on the basis of 15% minus actual tax paid or advance tax paid. So the 15% of this value would be 16944, and advance tax paid is only 12,000. So the remaining would be 4944. Now there's a rule number 119A which says that for the calculation of interest under section 234B, C, A, etc., the amount need to be considered in the 100 of multiple of rupee. Any other multiplication would be ignored. So the interest need to be calculated on 1944, but due to rule number 119A, we will take the value as 4900. And what is the rate if you default? On first installment, the rate is 3% straightforward. So 3% of this need to be the interest under section 234C paid by SSE on default of first date. The second date would be 15th of September. Now we need to check if it is less than 36%. The 36% would be 40,666. The advance tax paid by the assessee on this date was 12,000 earlier paid, and on this date he has paid 36,000. So technically he has paid more than this. He has paid 48,000. So that means no advance tax interest liability on this date because he has paid more than this value. So this value is exceeding the 36% of the value, so there would not be any shortfall. No interest on this date. Now the third date would be 15th of December, on which we need to deposit 75%. If it is less than 75%, then interest need to be applicable, and that would be 84,720 need to be at least deposited. The amount of deposit is 48,000 as earlier and 30,000. On December advance tax, he deposited 30,000. Total deposit is 78,000. So now there is a shortfall, and because there is a shortfall, so interest need to be calculated by 75% less advance tax, etc. paid. So the 75% is 84,720 less the amount paid is 78,000. The balance amount is 6,720 for the calculation of interest, but as per rule number 119A, we will ignore and we will take the 100 multiple of rupee for the purpose of calculation. The 3% interest would come to 201 rupees. Now the last date calculation need to be done. That is on 15th of March. 100% required to be paid as advance tax. The total value was 112,960. The total amount has been paid yet is 1,03,000. 78,000 plus 25,000. So total amount is again less than this value. So advance tax interest under section 234C need to be calculated. 100% minus advance tax paid. 100% is 112,960, deduction 103,000, and now this is 9,960. Again, we need to take the 100 of multiple of rupee 9,900 and the rate would be only 1%. So that would be 99 rupees. Interest under section 234C would be 147, 201 and 99 rupees. Total will be 447 rupees interest under section 234C. If I'll ask you whether section 234B interest would be applicable in this section or not, what is your answer? How we will find out 234B interest is applicable or not? I am not asking you to calculate the interest because you cannot calculate the interest of 234B as the income determination or section 143(1) date has not been given. But I'm just trying to ask you whether section 234B interest also applicable in this case or not. We have to deposit at least 90% of this. So total was at least 1 lakh total of this 112960. At least 90% of this need to be deposited, which will 101664. And we deposit 103000. That means no interest under section 234B could be applicable because the amount has been paid 90% or more as advance tax. So there would not be any interest under section 234B in this case. Clear. Well done. So that's how we need to calculate interest under section 234B and 234C. Now moving on to our provisions of MCQ. One by one, very simple questions for the MCQ purpose, because majority of question is just you need to tell that whether TDS is going to be applicable or not. So here are question number 1. The question says the deduction of tax at source from the salary shall be made at the time of. When TDS is required to be deducted in this case? Somebody is saying B. Sania was saying B. The correct answer is, of course, option number C. Second, reduction of tax from salary as per section 192 shall be 10%, 20% at the average rate of income tax computed on the basis of rate, force, and so and so. The correct answer would be option number C. Next is reduction of tax rate from accumulated balance of the recognized provident fund withdraw by the employee shall be. What is the rate in this case? Question number 3, correct answer is of course option number C. The liability to deduct tax at source in case of income from interest on security arises at the time of. Question number 4. The correct option is again C. Question number 5. I guess question number 1 correct answer was B. From salary, the correct answer is of course B. At the time of payment of salary. It's not C, it's a time of payment of salary, deduction of TDS required to be made. Correct. Next question number 5. No TDS on interest on listed debenture is to be done by the company in which public are substantially interested. The correct answer in this case is D. The TDS rate in case of listed debenture for the financial year 24-25 is question number 6. The correct answer is D. I was telling you in all these questions, the answer is just need to be on the basis of the amount specific or the rate which has been given in the question. So I guess all the question you should try yourself. I will send the answer sheet so you can review that your answers are matching with that or not. If there's any issue, we can discuss these questions on Monday. Of course, you can ask me your query on Monday regarding this. So there are 34 questions, 34 we have discussed. 33 is for advanced tax calculation and all other questions are regarding the rate, etc. So I guess there is better that you will try it yourself. That would be really give you more clarity, and please try them when you have revised all the provisions of TDS, because you just need to remember all the rates and the amount specific in that section. If you're able to recall those provisions, you are able to solve these all questions. Okay. So TDS provision, if you want, you can ask any query. Apur, you can upload IOFS chapter and this chapter PDF. IOFS chapter, I guess we have discussed from the study material. Only a deemed dividend part has been discussed from the separate notes. If you want, I will upload those deemed dividend part. And this chapter has been completely discussed with the help of with only study material. So I guess no need to upload this study material. You have already this study material with yourself. Okay, this is somebody is asking reduction topic. I will check that question, test knowledge question. Let me take the picture of your query. Who is this? Anishka. So I will take that question and we can discuss that deduction question number 3, test your knowledge, STCG point in the next class. Do not worry, I will let you know the query. What is your issue? We will solve it in the next class. If there is any more query, students, you can ask. Appu is asking, sir, in study material, the things are scattered. So I am asking for PDF with highlighted marking. I will upload this sheet, whatever with myself or from which sheet we have discussed these provision. I upload that PDF of TDS. You can download it, of course. We can do that. Page number 7.54. Hardik is asking something. Let's wait. On page number 7.54. This is for section 194IA. Okay. In that case, it has been clarified that the value what we are taking is aggregate value of the property, not the transferee wise. Suppose if the property value is 60 lakh and there are 3 persons, those are the owner of the property, and everyone is going to pay 20 lakh rupees. So they are paying 20 lakh, 20 lakh, 20 lakh each. So the buyer is technically paying total 60 lakh and the transferee is receiving. The transferee is the technically buyer in this case. So he's paying 20 lakh by 3 buyers. So you cannot take it separately because the property consideration is exceeding 50 lakh rupees. So TDS need to be deducted. So the provision was like this, that the consideration for the property need to be checked. Whether the buyer are, there are 10 buyers, those are paying 10 lakh rupees for purchasing a property. So they are all co-owners of that property. Each of one is paying 10 lakh rupees. The total value is 1 crore rupees. So you cannot say that TDS provision would not be applicable because the limit of 50 lakh is not been exceeding. So that is not buyer or transferee wise. This is on the basis of property wise. So TDS need to be deducted because the provision says It is clarified with effect from 1st October that where there is more than one transferor or transferee. So it does not matter that the transferor is more than one or transferee is more than one. If the property stamp duty value or the consideration exceeding 50 lakh rupees, then TDS required to be deducted. Number of transferee, number of transferor, the amount of payment made by each transfer is not going to be considered because maybe with the help of these more than one transfer or one transferee, you want to ignore the provision of TDS applicability. So that would not be possible because the property value need to be taken for this purpose. Anil is saying property value is key. Yes, property value is key. The number of transferee, number of transfer is irrelevant. Any other query, students? I guess there is no more query left. So we will see each other on Monday. So Ashok sir, can we conclude the session? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Over. Thank you so much. Thank you.